Bright morning, everyone. I am Reme Dilbatan and I am the first presenter of the Group 2. Today, we're going to discuss about the global population and the mobility, which is it focusing on the two critical concepts that have fundamentally reshaped our world. It is the global demography and the global migration. Let's start with global demography. Let's start with the demography. It is the scientific study of the determinants and consequences of human population trends. The most important trend we study is the massive population increase, a rise of billion of people that began about 200 years ago. This massive growth is a result of global demographic transition. So this model describes the transition from high birth and death rates to low birth and death rates as a society develops economically. So let's break down the critical stages. First stage is the pre-industrial. In the past, both birth rates and death rates were high, keeping the population low. High birth rates was needed because the infant mortality rate or the IMR was high. High death rate was caused by disease, famine, and poor sanitation. So, for example, this describes human population globally before the 18th century. Next, stage 2 or the industrialization begins. The death rate falls sharply due to the advance in sanitation, food supply, and basic medicine. Crucially, the birth rate remains high. So these gaps causes the population increase very rapidly. For example, many countries in sub-Saharan and Africa like Niger are currently the stage experiencing fast population growth. And stage 3, which is the slowing growth or the late expanding. So, as society urbanizes and educates its people, the birth rate starts to fall significantly. Children are no longer primarily economic assets. So, the spread of contraception and the rising status of women are the key factors. For example, in countries like Mexico and India are often categorized as being in stage 3 as their population growth begins to slow down. So in stage 4, it is the stabilized, wherein both the birth rate and the death rate are low, leading to a large but stable population. So the natural increase rate or the NIR is close to zero. So for example, most developed countries including the United States, Canada are in stage 4. Stage 5 and the last stage. In this optional stage, the birth rate falls below the death rate, resulting in a shrinking population and an aging workforce. So for example, in Japan and Germany are currently facing this challenge of population decline. Next, we shift to mobility or the global migration. So migration is the crossing far boundary of a political and administrative unit for a certain minimum period of time. The UN defines a migrant broadly as any person who is moving or has moved across an international border or within a state away from his or her habitual place of residence, regardless of their legal status, voluntary choice, or reason. The decision to migrate is driven by two opposing sets of forces, which is the push factors and the pull factors. So push factors are the reason to leave. These are the negatives that force people not to move away. First is the political, then the economic, and then the environmental. So these are the reason. And next is in pull factors or the reason to attract. These are the positives that attract migrants to a new location. First is the economic and their social demography. It is a massive increase of billions of people occurred no less than 200 years ago. This is the global demographic transition brought by momentous changes reshaping the economic and demographic life cycles of individual and restructuring populations. Clearly, before the transition, the growth of the world population is close to stationary, defect, depicting that life is short. Births were many, growth is slow, and the population is young. To conclude, the dynamics of the modern world are shaped by these two simultaneous transformations: the demographic transformation, which dictates how many people there are and their age structure, and global migration, which determine where they live and why they move. Understanding both is critical to addressing global challenges. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So, bright morning, everyone. I am Faith Diataw, and now let us proceed to demography. So, since 1800s, global population size has already increased by a factor of 6, and by 2100 will have risen by a factor of 10. So there will be 50 times as many elderlies, but only 5 times as many children. Thus, the ratio of elders to children will have risen by a factor of 10. So the length of life, which has already more than doubled, will have tripled, while births per woman will have dropped from 6 to 2. So now let us move on to the Malthusian theory. So, Thomas Malthus was the first person to draw widespread attention to the two components of natural increases births and deaths, which is called fertility mortality. So, Malthus formulated an essay titled Essay on the Principle of Population, initially published in 1789, wherein he postulated that population tended to grow geometrically, while the means of subsistence grow only arithmetically. Thomas Malthus also argued that the difference between geometric and arithmetic growth created a tension between the theme between the growth of population and the means of subsistence. This gap could not persistent and definitely. Also, in the said essay, it was mentioned that population was held in equilibrium with a slowly growing economy. Faster population growth would depress wages, causing mortality to rise due to famine, war, or disease, in short, misery. Depressed wages would also cause postponement of marriage, resulting in prostitution and other vices, including contraception. This he called preventive check. Since population could potentially grow more rapidly than the economy, it will always held in check by misery and vice, which were therefore the inevitable human lot. So economic progress could help only temporarily because population could soon grow to its new equilibrium level, where misery and vice would again hold it in check, but only through moral restraint, that is, the chaste postponement of marriage. So, did Malthus believe that humanity might avoid this fate? And he thought that this is unlikely outcome.
Bright morning, everyone. My name is Maria Antonia Chanova, and today we are going to discuss about the population explosion. So, contrary to what Malthus predicted, mortality has not risen to curb work population growth. As mentioned, the world population boomed up to near billion in 1800s and reached 6 billion by the end of the 20th century. Apparently, Malthus did not recognize the force of the Industrial Revolution, which produced exponential growth in the means of subsistence. So Malthus predicted rising mortality to control population, but instead the population boomed. So this surge halin sa 1 million 1 billion in 1800s to 6 billion sang end na sang 20th century. So Malthus overlooked the Industrial Revolution's impact, which increased subsistence and fueled growth. Next is the demographic transition. During the first half of the 20th century, demographers conceived the notion of demographic transition. The demographic transition is a framework, illustrates population growth in terms of discrepancies and changes in two crude vital rates, mortality and fertility. Strip of the essentials, demographic transitions refers to the transition from high birth and death rates to low birth and death rates as a country develops from pre-industrial to an industrialized economic system. So, the demographic transition is a concept developed by the demographers para explain if how a country's population growth changes over time. So during some first half of 19th century, experts started studying how populations grow and changes. So this model focuses on two important factors. First is ang mortality, which is the death rates, then the fertility, which is the birth rates. So it shows how these two rates change as a country develops economically and socially. So basically, it's the story of how population growth changes as societies progress halin sang farming villages pakadto sa modern cities. So next is the first stage of demographic transition, which is the pre-industrial society. Pre-industrial society is a high and unstable birth and death rates, population growth, rates low, importance of children, low life expectancy. So, sang pre-industrial society, amo ni siya ang first stage siyang demographic transition. So, amo ni sang ga-describe sang life before pa sang industrialization. So, diri ni nga ang mga tao galive pa sa rural and galive pa sa farming communities. So, sa pre-industrial society, we have four rates: the birth rate, death rate, the population growth, and the life expectancy. So, the birth rate is high and unstable. The death rate is also high and unstable. Then, the population growth is low. Then, life expectancy is low also. So, we have here the reasons for the changes in birth rate. First is the children are needed for farming. So ang isa ka family may ara sang damo nga children para amo ni ang ginapahelp nila sa ila obra sa farm or sa mga duta nila. So next is they die at an early age due to illnesses. So may ara sang mga children nga gakapatay bata pa sila gakapatay tungod sang mga sickness and poor living conditions. So, parents have more children para i-replace sa bata nga wala nakasurvive sa amo na nga living or lifestyle. Next, number 3, no family planning and conception or giving birth is encouraged by religion and society. So, no, wala sila family planning. And also, may gamay lang ilang knowledge about sa contraception or access to contraception. And kis gina-encourage sila sang religion or tradition nila nga magpadamo children or gapadamo bata. So next is for the reasons for the changes in death rate. First is the disease. Of course, kay sa pre-industrial society, wala sila sang modern medicine. So, damo may kakapatay tungod sang infection and epidemics. So, next is the famine. So, famine is the food shortages are common, leading to hunger and death. Next is the poor medical knowledge. So, people don't understand about some hygiene and also paano i-treat ang illnesses effectively. So, in short, life was tough, people had many children, and death was common. So, ang population growth stayed low and unstable. So, next is stage 2 sang pre-industrial, stage 2 sang demographic transition, which is ang early industrial society. In the early industrial society is high birth rates, falling death rate, high population growth. So diri na ding sa stage 2 ga-start na mag-industrialize, meaning may mga factories na, then may mga better tools na, and also may ara na sang basic technologies. Then next is may ara man rates ang early industrial society. May ara sang tatlo ka rate. So first is the birth rate, death rate, and also the population growth. So ang birth rate naman sa early industrial society is still high, and while the death rate starts to fall. Next is the population growth becomes rapid because more babies are being born than people dying. So we have here the reasons for the changes in birth rate. So first is also same man sa pre-industrial society, mayroon man sang ang children needed Japon sa farming. Next is number 2. They die at an early age due to illnesses, no? Same lang Japon sa stage 1, which is the pre-industrial societies nga magkakapatay sila tungod sang illness or mga sickness. So people still have so many kids to ensure some survivor. Next is the no family planning and conception or giving birth is encouraged by religion and society, no? Though same lang sila sa pre-industrial society. Next, we have here the reasons for the changes in death rate. First is improvements in medical care. No, mayroon na sila sang better medical care. Unlike sang pre-industrial society nang wala pa sila sang modern medicine. So next is the water. So no, naga-improve na ang ilang water supply. The next is the supply and sanitation. May ara na sila sang better nga sanitation kag may ara na sila sang knowledge kung paano mag-sanitize ang ilang self. Next is the fewer children die, no? Nagadutay na lang ang kakapatay nga children sa early industrial society. Unlike sa pre-industrial society nga damo ang kakapatay nga children tungod sa kakulangan sa resources and also tungod sa mga unsanitized or wala pa sila knowledge kung paano i-hygiene ang ilang paano mag-perform sa hygiene. So, in short, a society industrializes, fever, people die, but people still have many children. So this causes a big population begin. So that's all. Thank you.
So, my name is Elarin Joy Gales, and I am your next presenter for today. So, we're going to proceed to the stage 3, which is the late industrial society. So, this stage is defined by two key population changes. First is the low death rate and a falling birth rate, which together still result in high population growth, though the growth is slowing down. Stage 3 is the period when a country shifts from having many children, which is the traditional society, to having fewer children, which is we have known as our modern society. So while enjoying the health benefits of modernization. So we also have here the stage 4, which is the post-industrial society, wherein in this stage, it is being characterized by low birth rates and low death rates. So this results in a very low population growth and sometimes even population decline. So also this stage represents the current demographic status of many high developed countries. So we also have here the reasons for low birth rate. So the birth rate drops significantly and remains low because of conscious choices of and societal changes. So first daring reason is the family planning. So access to and use of contraception is widespread, allowing couples to control the size and timing of their families. Another one is on good health. So better health and lower infant mortality mean parents are confident their children will survive, so they don't need to have many births to compensate for potential losses. And lastly, we have the latter marriage. People, especially women, pursue higher education and careers, leading to delayed marriage and childbirth. This shortens the total potential reproductive period. So, kung may reasons for the low death birth rate, we also have the reasons for low death rate. So, the death rate stabilizes at a very low level due to continuous improvements in quality of life and medicine. So, first reason, we have the good health care, advanced medical technologies, universal health coverage, and specialized care increase life expectancy. We have reliable food supply. Stable and nutritious food supply eliminates deaths from famine and severe malnutrition. And we have also the people are living much longer. The combined effect of health and food means the majority of the population lives well into old age, resulting in a very high life expectancy. So next, we have the DDT or the demographic transition theory. So this theory describes how a country's population growth changes as it develops economically, moving from high death and birth rates to low death and birth rates. So the demographic transition theory, while insightful, faces significant criticisms regarding its universality and predictive power for contemporary developing nations. So this model is fundamentally Western-centric, having been formulated by observing the historical demographic shifts of Europe, America, and Japan, whose unique cultural and economic starting points may not apply to nations such as Africa, Asia, or Latin America today. Furthermore, critics argue that the decline in fertility rates is not inevitable for all developing countries, while modern aid and medicine rapidly lower death rates, thus necessary social and economic development, like widespread education and women's empowerment, needed to lower birth rates may lag, resulting in prolonged periods of high population growth. Finally, the timing is unpredictable because modern medical technologies allow developing nations to achieve rapid drops in death rates, compressing the transition timeline in ways the original slower transition of the industrialized West did not experience. So in conclusion, the demographic transition model or DTM is summarized here as a development roadmap suggesting that developing countries can effectively manage their population growth by following the historical path of industrialized nations. The core argument is based on the observation that developed nations like US, UK, and Japan successfully underwent a significant socio-economic shift that lead to naturally lower population growth rates or via low birth and death rate. That would be all. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Trina Gabayeron. So now let's proceed to fertility transition theory. This theory states that fertility is declining in the less developed countries at a rate which exceeds the rate of decline that was experienced in developed countries. It seems to be related directly to the extent to which modern contraceptives are employed. This theory suggests that fertility rates in less developed countries are dropping today than they did in developed countries in the past. The key reason for this rapid decline is the widespread of use of modern contraceptives. Because these contraceptives are easily accessible, couples can control the number and spacing of their children more effectively. So, in modern times, information about contraceptives is widespread due to mass media. So, modern mass media also spreads information about family planning quickly and broadly. As a result, fertility declines happen much more rapidly in today's least developed countries than they once did in developed nations. Stripped of the major points, the fertility transition theory asserts that while economic development can create a climate conducive to reductions in fertility, it is a change in cultural attitude about large families and willingness to use contraception that matters aside from the presence and variability of contraception itself. The fertility transition theory emphasized that declining fertility is not driven by economic development alone. Instead, it argues that lower fertility happens when cultural attitudes shift away from valuing large families. People must also become willing to use contraception as a normal and acceptable practice. While access to contraceptives is important, it is the change in mindset about family size and contraception that truly drives decline. In essence, cultural transformation and acceptance of family planning are central to the fertility transition. So now let's proceed to global migration. Still, opposition to birth control and family planning are plenty. The manufacture, distribution, and education about use of contraceptives remain expensive. Religion can block birth control programs. Others are of societal concerns, low status of women, lack of political and economic rights, and lack of access to education. Despite progress in family planning, significant resistance to birth control still exists. Contraceptives can be costly to produce, distribute, and teach people to use, making access difficult for many communities. Religions belief in some areas also oppose birth control programs and limit their acceptance. In addition, social issues such as the low status of women, limited political and economic rights, and poor access to education further hinder family planning efforts. Together, these barriers make it challenging for many people to fully benefit from modern contraceptive methods. Since the earliest times, humanity has been on the move. Some people move in search of labor or economic opportunities, to join family, or to study. However, not all migration happens in positive circumstances. Others move to escape conflict, persecution, terrorism, or human rights violations. Similarly, others move in response to the adverse effects of climate change, natural disaster, or other environmental factors. Human beings have always migrated from place to place throughout history. Many people move to find better job opportunities, education, or to join their families. However, not all migration is the voluntary or positive. Some people or individuals are forced to leave their homes because of war, persecution, terrorism, or other human rights abuses. Others must migrate due to climate change, natural disaster, or environmental problems that make their homes unsafe. Migration has been a constant part of human history, with people moving from one place to another for many different reasons. Some migrate willingly in search of jobs, better economic opportunities, education, or to reunite with family. However, not all migration is voluntary or positive. Many people are forced to move because are the fleeing conflict, persecution, terrorism, or serious human rights abuses. Others are displaced by the impacts of climate change, natural disaster, or environmental destruction, making migration a necessary response for survival. Global migration is a complex phenomenon that tackles on a multiplicity of economic, social, security, and several aspects of affecting our daily lives in a rapidly interconnecting world. On the other hand, migration encompasses a large variety of movements and situations involving people. Migration is embroiled with geopolitics, trade, and cultural exchange and provide opportunities for several countries, business, communities, and cultures to benefit in a grand manner.
Good day, everyone. My name is Ran Rhea Gonzaga, and today I will be discussing to you about the global migration. So today, more people than ever before live in a country other than one in which they were born. In 2017, the number of migrants reached 258 million compared to about 173 million in 2000. However, the proportion of international migrants in the world population is only slightly higher than that recorded over the past decades, equaling 3.4% in 2017 compared to 2.8% in 2000 and 2.3% in 1980s. While many individuals migrate out of choice, many others migrate out of necessity. There are approximately 68 million forcibly displaced persons, including over 25 million refugees, 3 million asylum seekers, and over 40 million internally displaced persons. So, migration means people moving from one country to another to live there. Just like, for example, I was born in the Philippines and to I want to live to US. So I'm a migrant if I want to live there. So more people are living in a different country from where they were born than ever before. So in 2017, there are approximately 258 million migrants compared to 173 million in 2000. So even though the number increased, migrants are still only a small part of the world's population. So why do people migrate? So some people migrate because they want to, for work, study, and for better opportunities. So other move because they are forced to, usually because of war, danger, and disaster. So a simple example of migration is first is the choice migration. So a nurse from the Philippines moved to Canada for a better job or for better opportunities. That example portray choice migration. So next is I have an example of forced migration. So a family leaves Syria because of war and becomes refugees. So because of war, they are forced to migrate. So next, migration is one of the most defining features of the 21st century. It contributes significantly to all aspects of economic and social development everywhere, and as such will be key to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals or the SDGs. So migration helps countries grow and is important for reaching the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals or the SDGs, which aim to improve life for everyone by 2030. So migration is a big part of life of today's generation, and it affects the economy, society, the development of our countries. Because of this, migration is important in reaching the SDGs, goals like reducing poverty, improving education, and promoting peace. Next is the 2030 agenda is well placed to reflect and exploit the links between migration and development for three reasons. First, the 2030 agenda is the first international development framework to include and recognize migration as a dimension of development. The agenda includes migration-related targets and recognizes its important contribution to sustainable development while acknowledging the specific vulnerabilities migrants may face. So, why the 2030 agenda includes migration? So, here's why the 2030 agenda includes migration. First, it is the first global plan that includes migration as a part of development. Second, it has a targets or goals connected to migration. Third is it understands that migrants help countries grow but also face challenges so that migrants need protection or extra safety. Second, migration interacts with all the dimensions of development. The multidisciplinary and cross-sectoral nature of the 2030 agenda is a useful platform to assess the impact of migration and human mobility on a range of development issues. So, simple examples of the goals of the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals are the economic growth. So migrant workers help build roads, work in hospitals, and support industries in other countries. So in educational goals, children of migrants getting access to school to help achieve the SDG goal of quality education for all. So third is reducing inequality. So when migrant workers are treated fairly and protected, it support the SDG goals of reducing the inequalities. These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are the SDGs. Number 1, no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger. Number 3, good health and well-being. Number 4, quality education. Number 5, gender equality. Number 6, clean water and sanitation. Number 7 is affordable and clean energy. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Number 10, reduce inequalities. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Number 13 is climate action. Number 14, life below water. Number 15, life on land. Number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Number 17 is partnerships for the goals. So these 17 sustainable development goals are a set of global goals adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So what is the purpose of SDGs? So its purpose is to address the most pressing environmental, social, and economic challenges facing the world.
Hello everyone, I am Daphne Isipido. So now, let's proceed to migrants. So according to the International Organization for Migration, or the IOM, a migrant is any person who is moving or has moved across an international border or within a state away from his or her habitual place of residence, regardless of 1. The person's legal status, 2. Whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary, 3. What the causes for the movement are, and 4. What the length of the stay is. So from this definition, two categories of migrants can be identified. So the first one is labor or economic migrants and family reunification. So when we say labor or economic migrant, these are people who move to another country to seek better economic opportunities such as employment or higher wages or salary. So their primary motivation is to improve their standard of living. So for example, is my auntie. So my auntie is a Filipino teacher, so she decided to move to the USA. It is because mas damo ang opportunities dito and mas higher ang iyang salary. And then family reunification. So often labor migrants or mga OFW brings their family members to join them in the new country. So that is family reunification. And then second one is forced migrants or asylum seekers and refugees. So forced migrants are those who are compelled to migrate due to adverse circumstances beyond their control. So for example, war, persecution, and etc. So an asylum seeker. So when you say asylum, it is like a bahay ampunan that offers shelter and support to people. So an asylum seeker is a person who seeks safety from persecution. So when we say persecution, it is unfair or cruel treatment because of who you are, what you believe, or where you came from. So an asylum seeker is a person who seeks safety from persecution or harm in the country other than his or her own and awaits decisions on the for refugee status under relevant international and national instruments. So an asylum seeker, it is like these are individuals who have left their country and are seeking protection in another country, but whose claim for refugee status has not been determined. So if for example, if dili maprobahan ang ilang refugee status, so there is a possibility nga ibalik sila sa ilang own country. So in case negative decisions, the person must leave the country and maybe permission to stay is provided on humanitarian goods or grounds. So a refugee person who, owing to well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinions, is outside the country of her or his nationality and is unable or owing to such fear is unwilling to avail himself or herself of the protection of that country. So when we say refugee, so these are people who have been recognized as needing protection because they cannot return to their home country due to a well-founded fear of persecution. So, for example, diba sa Gaza? So, in Gaza, there is a war. That is why some of the people there fled their own countries to seek asylum to another country. It is because, diba, delikado na sila nga lugar. So, they need asylum in another country para ma-protektahan sila. And then, drivers of migration. Drivers of migration are forces which lead to inception of migration and to the perpetuation of movement. So, drivers of migration include economic, demographic factors, and environmental factors, social and political dynamics. So, when you say economic factors, mostly migrate sila because or to seek better opportunities or better job opportunities and income. And then demographic factors naman are changes in population, age, and other statistics. And then environmental factors are disasters and climate change. And then social and political dynamics naman are discrimination, poverty, and family separation. So people may migrate to access better economic employment and educational opportunities for themselves and their families. Some migrate due to lack of access to fundamental human rights such as health, food, or basic education, and due to discrimination, poverty, or separation from family.
So, bright evening, Miss. I am Stephanie Bihosol. So, for continuation, they may move in response to crises both natural and human-made, and increasingly in response to environmental change. How drivers interact in different dimensions like scale, location, distance, and duration affects how governments and the international community can respond in order to effectively protect migrants, govern migration, and harness its benefits. So this means that people often move because of crises, whether they're natural disasters or caused by humans. More and more, environmental changes are also forcing people to migrate. So how these different reasons for moving interact with each other, considering how big the problem is, where it's happening, how far people are moving, and how long the situation lasts. So affects how governments and international organizations can best help migrants manage migration and make the most of the opportunities it presents. So now I have here some of the drivers of migrations are as follows. So first we have the economic and demographic drivers. So economic opportunities, demographics, and poverty or food insecurity are prime influencers in the immigration decision-making process and interact to greater or lesser degrees depending on the specific context to drive migration. So meaning that economic and demographic factors are key reasons why people decide to move. So things like job opportunities, the population's characteristics, and whether people have enough food and money play a big role in this decision. So these factors all work together, and how much each one affects migration can change depending on the specific situation. The second one, we have the environmental drivers. So a great number of countries identified as climate vulnerable tend to experience high rates of immigration. So it is critical to consider environment and climate related evidence when analyzing current migration patterns and estimating future flows. So environmental factors, including those related climate change and natural disasters, directly and indirectly impact the resilience and vulnerability of individuals, households, and communities, and may lead to migration. Climate change drives migration depends heavily on its interaction with other factors, including the perception of risk by affected communities and varies among and within communities. So this means that environmental factors are increasingly recognized as significant drivers of migration. So countries that are highly vulnerable to climate change often experience high rates of immigration. So this means that when we study why people are moving, it is crucial to look at environmental and climate-related informations. So factors like climate change, and natural disasters can directly and indirectly affect how well people, families, and communities can cope with the challenges. So climate change doesn't automatically cause migration. Its impact depends on how it interacts with other things, like how communities see the risk and how those risks differ from place to place. Next, we have the human-made crisis. So human-made crises are among the primary root cause of migration and have an important impact on population movements more generally. So the lack of respect of international human rights and humanitarian law has compounded growing displacement. So now let's move on to the last one, which is the human-made crisis. So human-made crises are among the primary root causes of migration and have an important impact on population movements more generally. So the lack of respect for international human rights and humanitarian law has compounded growing displacement of many as a consequence of their deteriorating living condition. So countries where there is a high perception of corruption tend to be net immigration countries, while countries where there are lower perceptions of corruption tend to be net immigration countries. While corruption does not necessarily cause migration, it is more accurately seen as a contributing factor to homes. So when countries don't respect human rights and humanitarian laws, people living conditions get worse, forcing them to leave. So also, countries with a lot of corruption tend to have more people leaving than coming in. So while corruption might not directly cause migration, it definitely makes things worse and pushes people to seek better lives elsewhere. So that's all. Thank you.